Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we will be talking about how to get your customer to write you thank you notes. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Phil Boyer. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background.
My background. So I am the one person in the world who studied something at the university level and didn't end up working in that field. I
Just the
studied.
only one.
I'm the only one, right? Yeah. I studied physics and mathematics. So I'm kind of a geeky, nerdy brain, but people throughout my life have told me I do have somewhat of a personality. But from that, I went into the natural phase from a physics degree in mathematics into a marketing services agency. I began to program computers at the time. Now, this was back in the 80s when, you had a computer with one floppy disk, the 5 1/4, and, a few programs on it. But we started doing some programming for the research we were doing. And I got really engaged with the notion of building technology. So my career progressed through technology. I had great opportunities in banking with some good mentors, building advanced technologies in banking, which was really fun. It kind of the toy store, we used to call it in our area of IT. So I ended up with this nice combination of understanding marketing, understanding sales, understanding how to build really industrial strength technology, good quality product. And that's really my background. In about 2000, I did some reading. I've always been entrepreneurial. I decided I wanted to work toward founding a company and eventually exiting the corporate space and just running my own company, which I did. My goal was in 10 years to be financially independent, and it worked out exactly to 10 years where I took my last paycheck from a corporate.
That's fantastic. So today we're talking about how to get your customers to write thank you notes. I'm curious, have you actually ever received one?
We have received thank you notes, and of course, it's more common to receive thank you notes in electronic form these days than it is in paper form. But we receive certainly electronic and email thank yous all the time, and I am certain we have received some notes in the mail.
And so tell me the philosophy behind that.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sure. The philosophy really is just understanding what is it that we want to be. Let me back up. I'll tell you what our objective in this company is, or our mission is, to be a light in the world. And I've been challenged by a lot of smart people on this, saying, well, that's really not a great mission. It really doesn't tell me what you are or what you want to be. And I'm thinking, that's cool. I like the abstract nature of that vision or that mission. And other people will say, well, how would you define that? Being a light might mean that you're shining light on a subject, you're educating someone, you're building something, you're being kind to people. Sure, bring all those in. Those are all good things. Ultimately, our objective in being a light in the world is this. We want to be that business when you transact with us, when you interact with our support organization, if you're a vendor or a supplier to us, when you have those kinds of engagements, if you're a competitor of ours, we want anybody who touches this business to walk away feeling like, wow, I wish there were more companies like that in the world. Okay, that's an objective. A home run is when somebody walks away saying, wow, I wish there were more companies in the world like that. I feel like I ought to up my own game. It inspired me to do that. So that's the basis of how do we create something where we would get those kind of thank you notes.
And that's really a great objective, to inspire people to be the best them that they can be. But so tell me though about the phrasing of that, because it's very, obviously we're talking about, the customer experience, customer service. And it's a topic that many people discuss, but you're talking about getting them to write thank you notes. So what does that actually then mean to you? That, what's the driver behind them? This concept of them actually writing something.
Well, again, the driver is this is the target that we shoot for, right? That our support is so good, people actually want to take the time to go buy a thank you card and write that and mail it to us and put postage on it and all that. That's the target.
Mm.
I had a CIO that I worked for in the banking industry at the time when we were trying to deliver the early stages of web-based banking and interacting with your bank completely on the web. And it was early. And his idea of we really hit the mark when we could get to mental telepathy banking. So if you think about, I want to make a deposit or I want to make a withdrawal, the cash just shows up in your hand. If I want to open an account, it just happens because you thought about it. So clearly that's a ways out still, but it was certainly a ways out from when we were doing it in the late 90s. But that's the notion of creating that really lofty goal kind of forms how you decide how to build a product, how to build your support, what you say, what are the principles in your support organization. I'm not sure I answered your question though.
No, it's, I mean, I think it goes back. You answered it, I think, between the first time and the second time, where it's really, it sounds to me, it's about wowing it, where somebody feels so different that it's no longer transactional. It's now something that they feel has value beyond the actual transaction, and what they intended. Would love to know, one of the challenges in customer service is obviously getting that same feeling across the whole organization. Obviously, being the leader, you're going to feel motivated to provide great customer experience. At least most leaders are. But how do you get that to go through the entire organization and make everyone care about it?
That's a really great question, and it's even something I'm introspective about now as the leader. How great am I at pushing out this kind of culture? We've done it a lot internally in meetings. We're always reminding ourselves, hey, that was an opportunity where you were light in the world to somebody. That was an opportunity. That was a situation, right, or a transaction where you did that. We think in terms of what our responses are. How far do we go in helping a customer? There are certain places, in fact, where we could go too far in helping a customer and potentially cause harm because our business deals with an IRS tax form. So we have to be certain we're not making assumptions. We're a technology provider, but we're not the tax practitioners, and we don't give tax advice. So there's a really interesting gray area that we have to walk often. So principles around how we're treating the customer are important. So we have a couple of key things that we always do. If a customer calls, we make sure we listen carefully. We don't interrupt them while they're explaining what their problem is. No matter how impatient we may become, or no matter how certain we are that, I know where you're going, I'm going to finish your sentence, right? Once we've heard what the customer needs, the first response that we all give is, I can help you with that. When somebody calls you, it's just very reassuring. It doesn't go straight into, well, let me look up your account or whatever. Just those simple words of saying we can help you with that, we believe helps kind of set that customer at ease. And especially, you can imagine if somebody's irate over something, and it happens, you can be the best provider in the world and people can be irate because their browser's goofy or an autofill happened, or their network connection was bad. So or their cat got run over that morning. You never really, these are real things. Every interaction that we do, we're humans interacting with other humans. Even our customer support agents, maybe their cat got run over. And we kind of say it tongue in cheek, but that would be a really traumatic experience for somebody. So we don't take those things lightly, and we always we always keep in mind, this is a human to human interaction. This is just another human being. It's not just a customer. It's not just a sale or potentially lost sale. It's a human being. How are we helping them? So how can we help you with that? And then do no harm is the other thing. And that's where we're kind of walking that gray area sometimes between, are we giving tax advice, or are we just giving advice on how to use our product, how other people use the product, that kind of thing.
So talk to me about the actual, I guess, experience of your employees learning this. Is it something that is just in a handbook, or how do you get it ingrained in them?
That's another great question. It's also something that we're prioritizing our budget this year, is to understand how to um, condense our training or make our training easier to use. The bottom line is it takes about 6 months for a support agent here to be fully functional in our support area. So we've had so many people come in with great deals of confidence. They've done customer support in the past. They understand how to interact with people, whatever it is. And most people at some point end up crying in the training process because they just feel overwhelmed with so much responsibility they have. And we always have to reassure them, look, everybody goes through this stage where you just feel this is so overwhelming, we're not going to be able to handle all these details. You will get it eventually. Now, I actually think that is not a great approach, because our standard operating procedure within support is all internalized in our support agents, meaning if we lose an agent, we have a 6-month ramp up to fill that spot again. So we're trying to figure out, how do we strike the balance between having really great knowledge base information, really great information published to the customer, but it all needs to be very easy to use, very quick to access. Another part of the getting thank you notes was not just the support, but it's how we build a product. So is the product really just delightful, and is it reliable? Or have we created a situation where you have to click this, then click this, and then click this, and then click this to enter this, and then click that? That's a clickstream example, but we try to think in terms of, how are we going to make this come as close to mental telepathy as we can?
Another noble goal. So how, so things don't always go right, and sometimes you do get those really irate customers, whether they should be irate at you or not. So, what have you? How do you prepare your team for that? And do you guys have tips around, de-escalating situations?
We do. So I can help with that. Actually, surprisingly, bring some of that energy down right away. Not all of it. And some people can be really difficult on the phone, just because some people are just really difficult people. But we still care about them. They're still a person, and we still need to support them. So I can help with that, helps solve the problem. And then also just pointing to the solution. I think it's common for people to get defensive. Oh, your site did this and this, and we know our product doesn't work that way. We know the site doesn't work that way. We have a whole audit trail of data and other things where we can tell how they navigated the site, and we can see where they made the mistake. There's no value in pointing that out to them. The value is in, let's help you get this fixed.
And so, I find that type of thinking, actually, I was ironically just talking to my daughter about that. I said, oh, my friend, she's 11 years old. Oh, my friend was rude to me. And, well, so what can you do about that? Oh, well, I could talk to her about it. And I said, well, you have to kind of pick your battles. Is it worth it? Like, is it worth to say, oh, I did this and I did that, and so really you shouldn't have been rude to me? I said, or, do you just say, I understand how you feel, I'm trying my best, or something like that. And for her
Sure.
situation. So where I'm headed with that is that that's not natural. It's not a natural response for, as humans to respond in that way. So how do you help people along that journey? Because to me, that's part of the leadership journey.
Sure. So one thing you really have to demonstrate it. So behaviors that are demonstrated are more likely to be taken up by your staff or whoever's following you. If you're a leader, right? Those are more likely to be taken up by the following crowd, as opposed to something you tell someone to do, or you point them toward a video or some training thing, right? So the first thing is, you really have to own those values yourself and demonstrate them. So it starts with, how do we treat our own staff? How understanding are we when they are in a place where all of a sudden they couldn't make a shift, and everybody had to scramble to cover, or when they're having a bad day? How do we treat them in compensation, and how do we reward them for other things? It's just everything. Are we above industry, standard? Yes, and we are in every way. So that's part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also just so the situation with your daughter, the situation with an irate customer, the situation with my own self and your own self in any given moment when it's, again, a human to human interaction. Nothing really is ever about us, right? But the standard human response is to assume everything is about us, right? When the football team's huddling, we know they're talking about us. So that's the nature of egocentricity, sort of that we try to wring out of people. Just keep in mind, there are so many other contributing factors that relate to why some person may be behaving a certain way, even to the extent that they could hurl personal insults at you.
Right.
And of course, yeah, all of our customer support staff are female, and
Mm.
most of our customers are truck drivers. So sometimes, not all, I mean, there are obviously a variety of personalities across the board, but it's a blue collar job.
Yeah.
And some of these folk can be a little rougher when they speak and
Mm.
whatever. So if they're angry, they could hurl a really painful insult directly at the person they're speaking with, not at the
Right.
company, not at the problem. You are just
Mm-hmm.
fill in the blank. We, even in those situations, we have to understand, because it helps us keep from getting our hair rising on the back of our neck. This response from this person is actually not about me. He directed it at me. He called me this, but it's not about me. And worst case scenario, if somebody really just can't handle an irate customer, we just have them escalate. Uh, I'll take it to my desk if needed. I'll contact a customer who's really difficult and I'll help them with the problem if needed. And that's happened in our almost 20 years in business, but I don't think it's happened in 15 to 10 or 15 years. I mean, it was early on, but our agents, they understand it now. They own it.
I like the mantra that goes in my head is focus on problem, not the people, and it helps me
Right.
remember that like it's not about the person's capability. And I mean, obviously, as a leader, we go and help people grow and develop them. But in the moment when we're dealing with a problem, it's about the problem and not about the individual. But I was listening to I can't remember his name, but he's a negotiator with Black Swan Negotiations, and he was talking about the first line that they say, is, in a situation like that is, it sounds like you have a reason for saying that. And I guess that's really disarming because then the person kind of feels like, oh, well, yeah. And then, they go on to kind of discuss what it is that they're feeling, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing because it works it works for a positive statement or a negative statement. It's just a method to get them to open up more.
Right. And you said they said it sounds like you have a reason for.
Saying that.
Interesting. I like it.
Yeah, and maybe you don't use it in, I don't know if you use it in de-escalation or not. It'd be an interesting thought to see, if somebody calls you a stupid pig and you're like, oh, it sounds like you have a reason for saying that. That might be an interesting experience. Like,
Exactly. Well, I mean, maybe the only issue that I would have with it is potentially it's going to keep the focus on
on
the
the,
emotional part of it, right? This is all my human response. I'm really angry that this happened and I'm pouring it out on you. And if we can just keep directing to the solution, and
Mhm.
sometimes they want to keep, yeah, but you're blah, 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 and this did that. And it's like, okay, but let's see if we can get this fixed for you.
Yeah, I actually used to work in retail, and I worked in the loss prevention department, and so I ended up becoming a district trainer for de-escalation. And one of the one of the things we did is kind of along the lines what you're talking about is ours was always about giving options. Um, I can help you with that. Like, sir, I need you to not speak to me that way. I'm happy to help you with this, or I'm going to have to, to end this call, or something like that, being like, hey, really trying to drive them to like, let's solve the solution, but I'm also not going to stand for this behavior. In our case, it was like, I'm going to have to, I'd like to be able to help you with this return, or I'm going to have to call the police or ask you to leave the store. I mean, it did come down to that.
I understand that. And, when you're in a store and you're around a lot of other people and a lot of other customers and prospective customers, you certainly don't want someone creating a scene.
Mm.
When you're one-on-one on a phone call, and usually that's where you feel it. You can get some nasty. Boy, we got a really nasty email the other day, and it was just about a reminder email that we send to our customers that, hey, you missed the filing date, and we want to make sure you're not adding up or accruing a bunch of IRS penalties and interest. And
Mm.
this one particular customer, and again, who knows? Like, maybe their dog got hit by the car that day, whatever it was. Woo! They turned the email black with all the language in it. It was crazy, and it was
Wow.
just about take me off your email list. So, okay,
Mm.
no problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like in those moments, you have to devoid yourself of the emotion, and I mean, not to say devoid yourself of empathy, but devoid yourself of the this is about me, and really just focus on how do we get to the end.
Yes,
Is
yes.
the only way. So you talked about
Could
oh.
I also just say that, I mean, I think there's a tendency also for human beings to want to enter into a blame situation then.
Mm.
Because oftentimes when someone's coming at you hot, they're saying you did this and your product or your support or you yourself personally did this and this. And we want to make that right all of a sudden, because now all of a sudden, we just feel like, they called me on the carpet for something I didn't do. And that is an injustice. And I'm going to deal with that first, and then we'll deal with their problem. But really, when we just keep focusing on the solution, just keep redirecting to the solution. Let's talk about how we can get this fixed. Let's talk about what we can do to make this right with you. That just always, all of that emotion, every time you redirect, it seems like it just notches down every time. And it's amazing how many of those calls end up with people apologizing. I'm so sorry. I acted like a beast at the beginning of this call. That was uncalled for. You've done such a great job. It happens all the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I mean, even from a customer's point of view, I can see that, like, I've caught myself in times being so frustrated with the company, and probably rightly so, and that person's the representative, and I've never spoken poorly to them, but that my tone of voice reflects my emotion, but it really has nothing to do with that person, right? Like, I sound frustrated, and I try to remind myself that this person is just doing their job, and they're not the one who came up with the policy, or they're not the ones who are interpreting the policy incorrectly, or like, we had an instance where I waited a month for a rug, and it's really frustrating when you've gone through 3 or 4 iterations trying to solve it, and then you're on like the fifth person, and that it's really hard to remember this person didn't cause this problem. So we've
So
got
this
to
is
do
this is an interesting point, because everybody who contacts our support organization for whatever reason has probably experienced a bunch of things that you just described.
that.
They've experienced really bad customer service, and maybe they've recently experienced, hey, if it happens twice in a row, it always happens, right? You're just feeling like every support organization is horrible these days. Nobody really wants to support you. And so that's another thing we have to keep in mind.
Mhm.
A lot of support organizations aren't like ours.
Yeah.
So keep
Well,
directing.
and the pandemic, I think, has driven online support down. I mean, I've never experienced the support that I have, and not about the actual people on the other end of the phone. The people on the other end of the phone are great. It's the waiting for 2 hours on hold to ask where the status of your order is, because it's been lost for a month. Um, it's things like that I really hope we don't come to accept that from an entire consumer base, where that becomes the standard. It's one thing if it's temporary, but I think one of the things being traveling around the world are the United States is really good at trying to put the customer first, and um, and have that instantaneous response and resolution than I've seen elsewhere in the world.
Right, right. Actually, that's a very interesting perspective too, because we also are dealing with a whole variety of cultures, right?
Mm,
Every person is a story, really, right? Every person has a certain DNA. I think we all come out of the womb hardwired in a certain way, right? Even psychological tests and things, some of them will test what are the sort of personality traits that are really hardwired in you. They're not likely to change. What are the things that you can change, and then there's this notion of, and this is a common in leadership training, being very self-aware of all of those traits you have and how other traits might, right? Myers-Briggs is a big one, right? Oh, I'm an
mm,
ENTP. Oh, I'm an I, whatever. And so, oh, so you're going to think of me this way. Um, that's probably not exactly how you should use that, but
mm,
so we're all a story, right? And upbringing, right? It's nature and nurture and all of that. So people respond to different inputs in different ways.
mm,
And as you say, what you're saying in the US, we're pretty good at putting the customer first. I love Italy. And when we travel to Italy, you just have to understand when you approach the hotel desk to check in, it might feel to an American like, what do you want? they,
mm,
they come across with a bit of a different attitude, but they are there to serve and they serve well.
mm.
Italians, they're passionate about quality in everything: food, wine, cars, hotels. So
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my experience has been recently in Australia, and they're very nice people, but man, you wait forever for a lot of things as an American. I'm not used to that. Like to the point where if you want to go to the bank to open an account, you have to have an appointment. Like, that's unheard of in the state. They got
until
bankers
now,
sitting around. Well, and that's my point. Is like, so the pandemic has made the changes in the states,
right?
and I really hope they're not permanent, because I think that's something that feels, um, for lack of a better word, after traveling around all the places, it feels a little magical. It feels a little magical that you can get you can go through the drive-through at the bank, or you can get instant, open up an account without planning ahead, or you can have your food delivered, groceries delivered. Obviously, most people have Uber Eats now, but not all of them have that like 2-hour grocery delivery, and just a lot of that, just these ideas to make our lives easier, right or
Sure.
wrong. I don't see everywhere.
Well, it's interesting you talk about banking in Australia. So I worked for a bank in Australia
Mm,
in my 1996, and we lived in Melbourne. And a couple of interesting things from that experience. I mean, in the U.S., we have social security numbers and birth certificate. I'm sure they have birth certificates in Australia, but
mhm,
there was a point system that they use in Australia that would, if you could cover enough points, then they would feel that they've successfully identified and authenticated you are the person you're saying you are, right?
like to know your customer, yeah.
Right. So in the US, once you have a driver's license or a passport or a social security number, that stuff's pretty solid. Obviously, it gets scammed all the time, but banks and other organizations can feel pretty good about that. In Australia, you had to bring a driver's license, a, a bank account from another bank, a statement from another bank, and a few utility bills, and
Mm,
a rent bill or a mortgage. There were a whole bunch of things that you could bring, and each of them had a point value. And if they added up to 80 or whatever the score was, then they could identify you easily. My point in saying all this is there's some prevention of customer support related issues too. So we have this identification kind of infrastructure in the US that's pretty solid, and other countries don't have it. So therefore, it's a little more difficult to get that bank account
mm,
open or whatever.
mm.
So the prevention of the support problems is just as important as how you deal with problems when customers have them.
No, that's a good point. If you see, and I guess it goes back to that business process optimization and stuff, and when you see kind of this recurring bottleneck or recurring issue, how can you change the workflow or the process or whatever in order to
Right.
to make it a non-issue. And obviously, in some of these instances, in some countries, it goes down to the actual government, and so sometimes it's not within their control. But yeah, you're right. I think issue prevention is worthy of investment and understanding, where your customers are feeling pain points along their journey.
For sure. And you're spot on. So and that works for you in Australia, you're spot on, mate. So that sounded a little more British, but forgive
It did
me.
sound a little British.
I mean, I'm American. So now I forgot what we were talking about.
Prevention, problem prevention ahead of time.
Thank you. So when we have somebody using our product and we see people keep bumping into this problem, they keep putting the wrong answer in this box or something, right? Then we figure out, well, what's a better way to help them understand, because some of it is a little convoluted. What value should you enter in this thing for this particular excise tax form? Okay. The interesting thing is, whatever you do to help all those people who are having that problem, you create a new problem for another set of people who will read it a different way. So you have to be aware of that too. And the thing is, the lesser evil sometimes has to win. It's like, well, we had 2% of customers were having a problem with this, and now it's 0.02% have a problem with the way we reworded it. We've improved it.
Yeah, absolutely. Measuring that unintended consequence.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about that this year you were going to be investing, more in reducing training time and pieces like that. And I'm wondering if you want to talk about, like, how important is it to put investments in this and in this experience and in this consistency among people? Is this something where if companies don't pay attention to, they could find that their NPS score starts to fail? Like, what's that trade-off of investing and the actual customer experience?
Wow. I don't know that I could answer it for the industry. I can answer it for us, and that is that it's just important enough. I don't have a business case where I can show some 5-year NPV where we're going to make money on the dollars that we spend today. It's really much more qualitative, but it's so important to me that our service it's a tightly run ship, that we're really effective, that we're really great, that we're really consistent, that it's worth it. But part of it, though, is, I guess, risk mitigation, right? Because this whole idea of a 6-month lead time on training, I'm probably going to get a bunch of people calling me or whatever later if we share how to contact me. But hey, we can offer you this service to help you with your training. We have somebody. We just hired the consultant. So, but there's a risk, right? Because we don't want a 6-month lead time to get somebody fully productive in support. That's too much of an issue.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really interesting conversation, Phil. I would love to hear kind of your 3 tips or takeaways that you want to leave with people today.
We've talked about a number of them, but well, okay. So values vary, and people's perception of value varies. So everything that we're doing is built around that idea of being a light in the world. If somebody else's mission is to be the cheapest product in the world, that has value to some market. And they may have more service related issues, because to be the cheaper product, they may have had to cut corners or whatever. So they have issues, and to be the cheaper product, they're not making the revenue they need to continue to invest in. I'm investing dollars this year in our support organization to make it even better. And I have those dollars because we're priced right. So, but the takeaway is really, I think the important things for us as it relates to services, I can help you with that as a very first statement, no matter how they're coming across, super friendly, super belligerent. Always point to the solution, and just always remember, you are a human and they are a human, and nothing they say and nothing they direct at you is really about you. You are both in your own state, given your own story at that point in time, and you're having to interact. And we really should, as human beings, just generally cut out the business and everything else. We should
Mm.
really genuinely care about other human beings and want to do good with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great note to end on. So, Phil, how can people get in contact with you or learn more about what you do?
You can find me on LinkedIn for sure. That's usually the best way. I'm not daily active on LinkedIn, but I will notice over a few days. So it's the LinkedIn where you use the slash for your particular page is just Phil Boyer for me. I got in early.
Nice. Well,
No
we'll include your link. So, thank you so much for being on the show today, Phil.
Thank you for having me, Jana.
And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.
Hey!